a great deal of uncertainty around the world about the kind of Brexit, if Brexit happens at all, that we're likely to see. And by opposing Theresa May's deal, aren't you making the idea of a softer Brexit more likely?
I sort of reject these terms harder and softer and all the rest of it. I think there are two varieties of remaining in the customs union that are currently on offer. If you read the papers today, it's clear that Jeremy Corbyn wants to, he's done a complete U-turn. He now wants to frustrate Brexit very largely by staying in a permanent customs union.
And we haven't seen the Prime Minister rule that out,
His proposal has the logic that it would mean the UK had some representation in setting EU trade policy and therefore UK trade policy. It's not clear how that will work. It sounds to me like being a member of the EU, quite frankly. The backstop, if you remember...
Well, we'll come on to the backstop, but let's stay on this, because people get confused about all these different terms. So on the question of the customs union, we're seeing the Prime Minister engaging with Jeremy Corbyn. She's written to him. In the letter, it doesn't explicitly rule out joining the customs union. I mean, what do you think about this idea that the government could reach a compromise with the Labour Party?
Well, as I said, the difference between the government's position in the backstop is that we would remain in the customs union, but we would have no say on it. Jeremy Corbyn's position at least has the logic that the UK would be somehow sitting around the table in Brussels. I don't know how it's supposed to work. It looks like staying in the EU. The problem with the backstop is that you're in the customs union. You can't do free trade deals. Brussels is running your trade policy. You're collecting tariffs and sending 80% of the value to Brussels. You're effectively a colony.
But you'll know that all the arguments that are very well rehearsed about the backstop, which is why it's the EU and Ireland say that it's necessary to be there, is to prevent a hard border from happening.
Sure.
But there are lots of talks going on about ways to try and change the backstop. Are you saying that the whole backstop has to go, or would you be satisfied with legally binding assurances that the UK would be able to leave?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that the argument is now about how to get out of the backstop and how to make sure the UK isn't locked in that prison of the customs union.
So what would be satisfactory to you?
And, well, I think some of the ideas that the Prime Minister has mentioned in the House do seem sensible. I think you would need to have a time limit, but you would also
could that time limit be expressed in a separate codicil, if you like, rather than opening up the whole of the backstop?
I don't think that would be good enough. And indeed, it's my impression from talking to colleagues in Downing Street that they don't think it will be good enough either.
Well, the Attorney General himself is looking into this. Wouldn't you, I mean, given everything that happened over his legal advice earlier, wouldn't you accept his assurances if he said this would be legally binding?
I think that I would want to look very carefully at what was being proposed, and it would have to give the United Kingdom a UK-sized exit from the backstop. We would have to be able to get out by a certain time, and we would have to be able to get out of our own volition. Otherwise, you're locked in arrangements that greatly suit the EU, that enable them effectively to run our trade policy and mean that we have not delivered on the result of the referendum. And worse than that, we have not secured any of the potential economic benefits.
But just to be clear, they wouldn't have to remove the backstop entirely?
Well, the backstop is a 175-page protocol about Northern Ireland. I think the most promising way forward is to do what is called the Malthouse Compromise. And the exciting thing about this is that it actually has the support of colleagues in Parliament on both sides.
Well, it may be exciting in the sense that it unites the Conservative Party, but the noises from the European Union, I mean, they haven't checked, well, no mean thing, but it hasn't changed anything in Europe, has it? I mean, Michel Barnier, the main negotiator, said that the backstop is the only operational solution. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, has said there is full agreement that the withdrawal agreement cannot be reopened.
But you would expect them, with great respect to those gentlemen, you would expect them to say that now. What everyone, I think, is hoping on both sides of the Remain Leave argument in the House of Commons, in the Tory, but then I think elsewhere, is that the Prime Minister now goes to Brussels and really gets the change we need in the text.
But this has been going on, hasn't it, for
and she
years?
has said that she will. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the great hope. And if she can do that, then we're at the races, because we then have a chance. If we can come out of the backstop, we then have the chance, I think, in the next stage of the negotiations, to do genuine global free trade deals. And we then have the chance to allow our regulations to develop in their own way in some of those areas where the UK leads the world. And that's, I think, a very exciting and attractive prospect for the UK.
The suspicion is, and it's voiced sometimes by your critics, is that actually there's not very much that Theresa May could do, because the idea of leaving without a deal holds no fear for you, and you'd be perfectly happy with that scenario, so you're not willing to compromise.
Well, I think that's an exaggeration, if I may say so. I think there would be challenges in leaving without a deal at all. But I don't think that is what is going to happen. I think under any circumstances, the UK and the EU will come to some sort of an arrangement.
One of those challenges might be what happens to sterling. And David Davis has said today that there could be a 20% drop in the value of the pound, and that might not be such a bad thing.
Well, the pound will go where it will. And I think that, yes, sometimes a depreciation of sterling can be useful for exports, but it has other consequences as well.
But 20%, you live with 20% drop in sterling.
That's not the objective.
It's not the objective, but it's one of the consequences. Could happen, couldn't it?
Well, let's see. Actually, the pound goes up and goes down depending on lots of.
If it goes down by 20%, people will notice it in the prices of food, won't they?
Well, sometimes you can have very significant falls in the value of the pound without that being passed on in the form of inflation. But let's see.
And another way that food prices could go up would also be under WTO rules, which would come into operation in the event of no deal. And that would mean as much as 36% tariffs on dairy produce.
Let's talk about that, because it's incredibly important to realise that the UK and the EU are run by responsible human beings who want the best for their citizens, the best for their businesses. I really don't think it reasonable to suppose that on April the 1st, they will decide collectively that they're going to allow a great forest of palisade of tariffs to spring up against
But these are the rules that you want. These are the World Trade Organization rules that by default come into force, don't they?
Except that, of course, under the provisions of GATT 24, as I'm sure our listeners know by now, it is possible for the UK and the EU bilaterally to agree to have a standstill arrangement to continue to protract the existing zero tariff,
if
zero quota
that's really the
system.
Case, then why does Michael Gove, very close to you in the Leave campaign, supports Brexit very strongly? He says nobody can be blithe or blasé about the real impact on food producers in this country of leaving without a deal.
Well, because I think he's talking about exactly the kind of tariffs that I don't believe would under any circumstances, be imposed.
He's dealing with these things on a daily basis, isn't he?
Sure.
Are you saying he doesn't know what he's talking about?
Well, look, I think the government at the moment is still trying to get MPs to agree to a deal that I think would not be right for this country. And what we must all do, I think, is get behind the Malthouse approach, which is very exciting, very attractive, brings together levers and remainers.
As you've explained to us already. I wanted to talk to you about the way that the rhetoric has been going in this debate, because we've had Donald Tusk talking about being a special place in hell for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan of how to carry it out safely. Are you feeling the heat?
The interesting thing is that there is a plan. And there it is. It's to go ahead and indeed the plan has been pretty much the same for months, if not years. And that's
what about his language?
To go ahead, whatever. But I think the interesting thing is that people now do have a very clear roadmap, and as I say, if you go ahead with Malthouse A, as we call it, then you take out the whole backstop, you put in a free trade backstop, you use existing technical solutions to solve the Northern Ireland border problem.
Well, as you know, a lot of people will say that's in the land of the unicorns.
Let's see. But if that is in the land of the unicorns, which I actually don't think it is, and I think the EU should accept it, I think it'd be fantastic, but let's suppose it is, then you go to the second variant, which also attracts the support of Remainers and Leavers, brings them together in our House of Commons. Then you go, not to the palisade of tariffs that you talked about just now, but to a standstill arrangement for 3 years, during which, and this is a big thing, we would continue to pay, but during which it would be possible for us to negotiate.
Well, we've discussed this and the opposition to that idea. But I wanted to move on to the politics of all of this, because it's been widely reported that Jacob Rees-Mogg is going around asking people to support you as leader. Is that something that you welcome?
Well, I haven't seen that widely reported as you suggest, and if I may say so, people are much more interested in what we are doing now as MPs.
Come on.
Because they are.
People are talking about who might be a potential future leader.
I think what they're really much more interested in is what
would you say to Jacob Rees-Mogg, if he's carrying out this, would you tell him to stop doing it?
Well, I have many friends in the House of Commons, and Jacob is certainly one of them. And but what everybody wants to do, whether you're Jacob Rees-Mogg or Nicky Morgan or Robert Buckland or Kit Malthouse or Stephen Hammond, what you want to do is get ahead with, I think, a programme and an idea that brings our party together.